Hi everybody, thanks for joining us for our live stream virtual production event. The students have been working really hard over the last 6 to 8 weeks. Many of these students had not used this technology before entering this class at that time, and they've been putting together this entire virtual studio that's around me, as well as a variety of technologies that you'll be getting to see throughout the day. The big attraction for this event is our guests. So I did want to share a few information about our guests, and I want to make sure that we're able to see them. Okay, there we go. We just want to make sure we've got all of our devices are active now. And so our first guest is going to be Lindsay. He is the founder of Office Hours Global and an expert on live streaming. He's been live streaming for well over a decade, since before it was really a regular thing. Also, we have Johannessen. He is the Global Director for Broadcasting and Live Events at Epic Games, and I believe he's coming to us from Europe, making this a truly global event. And finally, we also have Bob Caniglia from BlackMagic Design. Bob is the Director of All Sales Operations for the Americas. He's joining us from Atlantic City. So with Alex in California, BK in Europe, and Bob in Atlantic City, we've got folks coming from all kinds of time zones into our little event here, and we've really gathered what are really the world's experts in virtual production, how to bring people, software, and technology, hardware, all together to make virtual production possible. So before we get to our guests, I want to give the students a chance to give you an overview of all the things that we have going on here in our Drexel studio in Philadelphia, so you can see a little bit more about what they've done to put this event together. To begin with, we'll have Nikki, who's right now in the Immersive Research Lab in a different studio than I'm in. Nikki, why don't you give us an initial introduction?
Thanks, Professor. Here in the Immersive Research Lab, or IRL, we have a very basic virtual production setup. In front of me, a BlackMagic Pocket Cinema camera. Behind me, a simple fabric green screen backdrop, and then lighting all around to make it all look good on camera. A setup like this is great for anyone looking at getting started with experimenting with live virtual production. However, this is just the beginning. Over on our main stage, we have a lot more technology at work, and Momo's there to tell us all about it.
Thanks, Nikki. Here in our main stage, we have 40 feet of wraparound green screen studio. Our video feed is being captured by 2 BlackMagic G2 studio cameras, which are currently being operated by Chelsea. Everybody say hi to Chelsea. And also on camera to TT, so everybody wave to TT. If we take a look into our cameras, we'll notice that there are a little bit of a change going on, and that's because we've added these reflective balls. These reflective balls are part of how we track the camera motion. We have a rig of 12 infrared cameras. I'm just going to show one right now in our studio, and what these do is, under the Vicon motion tracking system, they shoot infrared light, and these reflective balls bounce back, and this is how we track our camera motion in digital space. So as my camera operator moves the camera for me, it also shows up in the digital space. On top of moving the camera and making sure that motion is tracked, we also have to track the lens of the camera. We do this by using a digital camera encoder system. This way, whenever my operator is changing the iris, the zoom, or the focus of the lens, it shows up in the digital space and it blends the two seamlessly. The background around me that is currently being focused in and out of by my camera operator is actually created in Unreal Engine. And we're actually going to head over to Matt, who can tell us more about how Unreal Engine is used to create live streams.
Of course, the virtual set you see doesn't exist in real life. Instead, it's a virtual location created by the students in this class. Built in Unreal Engine, the set is rendered at the same frame rate as our live cameras are capturing video in our studio, providing the background and augmented reality foreground elements that you see in this webinar. One of the more valuable aspects of the set is the ability to incorporate live data right into the scene. In our case, that's showing your questions and comments as integral parts of the set. Nikki, would you like to tell us a little more about how that works?
Thanks, Matt. One of the things we really wanted to be able to do with a live event like this is to be able to involve the audience. So as you enter your comments and questions into the various chats, we are bringing them into Unreal to display on a ticker in our virtual set. We use Google Sheets to store all of the comments and its API to bring all of that into Unreal. In Unreal, we're using blueprints to apply all that data onto text and animate it. That text is then getting captured by an orthographic camera, which is put onto a texture and then put into a material. That material gets put onto the ticker, which we see in the virtual studio. Now that we have our data incorporated with our virtual scene, we still need to composite our green screen video with our virtual studio background and then live stream all of that to the internet. Let's go back to Momo, who can explain how BlackMagic tools make this all possible.
Thanks, Nikki. On top of our BlackMagic cameras, we also use two more tools from BlackMagic. The first is the Ultimat 12 boxes. We have one setup for each of our cameras. What these do is composite the green screen that's all around me into the virtual background. So these take care of transferring all of the green out and putting in the virtual background, as well as giving us more choices on how to handle the background as well as the color of it. On top of that, we also need to enhance and edit on top of our video feed, and we use the ATEM Constellation 2 ME to do that. So if we wanted to have something such as lower graphics, that is what we'd use it for. With 20 inputs of SDI and 12 outputs, this little box does all of the heavy lifting of putting together stuff for our live stream in YouTube or Zoom.
That's right, Momo. But there's one more thing we have to mention about our streaming setup here, and that's how we get live guests into our event from all over the world. We're all accustomed to using things like Zoom these days, but we need to take our guests' video and input them into our SDI video production system. To do this, we're using Zoom ISO software to take each guest's individual video from a Zoom meeting and assign them a unique SDI socket in our production system. The result is live video from each guest in the same input or same format as our cameras in our studio. And speaking of our guests, I think it's time we hear from them. Titi, who's joining us first?
Thanks, Matt. Our first guest is Alex Lindsay, Head of Operations at 090 Media and founder of Office Hours Global's, a community of over 5,000 media and event professionals. Alex, you've been doing live streaming events for some of the world's largest companies for what seems like more than a couple decades. How do you see this technology impacting the business and process of live streaming events?
I think that it's pretty exciting. You know, before I was doing live events, I was actually doing a lot of virtual events. I can probably show a couple things here. If you look at this is from 2005. So I was putting together these. Now these weren't live. These were, working with, a variety of these, building virtual sets around these. But these were very old-fashioned. This is for PBS. This is a larger virtual set. And all of these, whether they were 2D or even in VR, all of these were building those and integrating them in, and oftentimes we were viewing them in real time, and we knew that eventually we'd be able to do it for live, and now we're able to. And so using things like Ultimat, I've been using Ultimat for maybe the last decade. When I bought Ultimat, by the way, not that I'm bitter, it was $33,000, so it's a little less nowadays, what it really lets us do is really build out those sets. We can do a lot of other things. We can build them. We can build information around them. So one of the things that you're showing is bringing that information in from the chat into those things. But that can be data. That can be a lot of other things that are kind of wired into the system. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity right now, for using virtual production again, and that's what I probably have done. Not in real time, but in almost real time, probably 2,000 shows with green screen and virtual sets, very successfully. And now, in the last couple of years, we've been moving over to doing it in real time, and it's been very successful. And it just means that we don't have to build a set. When we want to change the set, we can change it anytime we want. We can, when the client will inevitably see the set and go, I really wish that was a little further over. And when it's a physical set, that's a lot of work. When it's a digital set, you go, oh, we'll just move that over for you, and they're very happy with that. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there.
And I think Amar is going to take it for the next question in the IRL studio.
Today? Sorry. Our first question for today is, how does virtual production change? Where did the question go? Where did the question go?
There we go. Yeah, and I can jump into that a little bit.
How does virtual
the
production
question
change
there
things
is,
for live streaming?
yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things you have to do is pay a lot of attention to it. I think that you want specialists that are paying attention to the virtual set. So you need someone there that's going to be paying attention to how that set's going to work. There's a lot of data. So there's the key. So a lot of times folks are a little lazy about how they do their green screen. Especially if you're doing it in real time, you really need to pay attention to the lighting on your green screen and the quality of what you're putting together to make sure that you're getting the most out of your green screen. You want to get every hair, every piece of glass. All those things are possible, and a lot of times you don't get them because it's not so much the hardware or the software. Most of it can do it very effectively. It's just the quality of the green screen. So having someone specialize in that is very important. Secondly, having someone that is going to be able to be on set, able to make changes to an Unreal set, for instance, is very important as well. There's a lot of adjustments that need to be made. Oftentimes there's integration. So you have, if you look at something like a Panasonic the 150s, those are going to have telemetry data that can go back. So whether it's match moving like what you have there, or getting telemetry from the cameras, that someone's got to manage that. so those are probably the two biggest things that you need is to have someone managing the virtual set, someone managing the key. A lot of the rest of it runs very much like a regular production.
And what are the most important things to plan for with virtual production?
I think that the main thing is a lot of research. You want to do a lot of testing and to make sure that you understand, what you can and can't do. Virtual production is very powerful, but you have things like the lighting on the green screen, and when you're changing that, if you have lighting effects, they may affect your key. Understanding exactly, one of the things that we get into is people add, when we're doing stuff, sometimes people will add smoke. Well, that affects our key too. so and it doesn't seem like a big deal. Oh, we're just hazing the scene a little bit. And we're like, well, that's going to, make it harder for us to do what we do. So you need to pay attention to, when you're planning it, is what might affect your screen and how that key works. You're also going to want to look at that tracking. So making sure that your tracking is going to be solid and making sure that you build your set so that you give, depending on how the trackers are working, you got to make sure that they're gonna hold that track. The worst thing to have happen is to have the set slip just a little bit, because it kind of gives it away when the set starts to slip a little bit. So making sure that works. Other things to look at is how you build that set and what you do with processing, so that you make sure that you're not seeing aliasing issues and other things that may occur. If you're using a LED wall instead of green screen, then you have Moray issues that you want to know where those cameras are going to go and know where those are going to pop up. But those are some of the key things that I would recommend paying attention to. Mostly it's doing lots of testing, and spending a lot of time in there, not just setting it up right before you do it. We try to do as much as we possibly can for oftentimes days, or we're working on it for weeks to understand how the system is going to, how the system's going to work when we actually get on. Live is very, as you know, is very unforgiving. Once you're in it, you're in it. And so it's all pre-pro, and making sure that you get ahead of it and you've tested it and you've rehearsed it. And those things are key to making sure that a live event goes seamlessly.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, Alex. I think we're going to go on to our next guest, who is BK Johannessen from Epic Games, which is the company that makes Unreal Engine. BK is Epic's global head of broadcast and live events. What do you have to show us today, BK?
Well, hi. Thanks for having me here. Pleasure to meet you all. And I have to say, awesome looking set. So kudos to the students of Drexel. I figured we would show just a little bit of a sizzle that we put together lately, just showing off some of the more, let's say, prominent examples of use of Unreal, with predominantly coming from sports and live segments. So if we play that little sizzle, it'll give you an idea of what's possible. So that gives you a little idea of some of the fidelity possible to achieve. And I'll tell you, it's you know, Unreal, although it's been widely adopted and being used in you know, both the biggest and smaller productions around the globe. You know, it's possible to create absolutely amazing content, but it is also time consuming, and it does require talent, which is why I'm happy to be here today, because I'm kind of talking to the future talent pool of people that can master the Unreal Engine and make it, you know, produce amazing content. So I think there's a great opportunity to learn it. I think there's a big need for this type of talent in the market. You know, I focus a lot on broadcast, but Unreal as a tool is really used across a lot of different industries. And I think because of the fidelity that we can achieve today, it's also, you know, gaining traction into, you know, Hollywood film production, where virtual production is becoming a really big topic for them, seeing how it really saves them a lot of time and makes, you know, the quality of their movies even better. So it's a fun time to be in the industry, and it's a fun time to pick up a new tool and learn it. And Unreal is a tool accessible to everyone. You know, anyone can go to unrealengine.com and download it. There's a bunch of learning materials available. So I encourage everyone who's curious to take it for a spin. I wanted to show this video as well, yeah.
Rams. Coming to you only as Nickelodeon can bring you. Say hello to Patrick Star. The iconic Nickelodeon blimp making its way into SoFi Stadium.
That's a Yeti?
A Yeti? Whoa! Whoa! Characters flying out. Is that Santa Claus? Oh, wait. What's he gonna do?
Whoa.
No.
Yeti!
No! Oh, my goodness! The Yeti is just causing havoc. You know what? Let's just drop down and let's take Baker Mayfield.
Second and long, and Bobby Wagner coming to town. Oh, there's Russ Wilson. Oh no! Woohoo! Oh, that's called an intraception.
Slung all over the stadium.
Wow, those are awesome, thank you. Our first question is, what Unreal skill set is most admired?
Oh, that's a great question. We have this notion of something called a tech artist, and that one is a very, very sought after resource. That is a person who is both kind of creatively inclined, but not necessarily an expert animator or expert, you know, in the modeling side, but also has a technical side of it. I mean, you've gone a little bit through the setup you have in your studio, and there is a bunch of technology at work. So somebody who kind of understands a bit, you know, what could potentially be related to the tracking versus what do I need to adjust on the key, and how does that actually play together with the real-time render engine. Somebody who is, you know, can do a little bit of scripting, maybe some Python scripting, or can really get into what we call blueprints that are visual scripting. that is maybe the most sought after resource, and you will easily get a job if you are a tech artist.
I think that leads very well into the next question, which is what skill sets are there shortages for people who are trying to get into this job market?
Well, I think a lot of them have shortages, put it like that. I think the world is getting more and more real time. We see more and more live productions that are utilizing more virtual tools. I already mentioned that it's making its way into other industries like the film industry. Automotive is a big industry for us, simulations and architecture. So I think across the board, there is a need for people that are skilled in the arts of real-time 3D. I think particularly within, I already mentioned kind of this tech artist function, but in general, people that are good 3D designers and also know how to, let's say, optimize something for real time, right? I think there's a big difference in somebody who's tremendously good at making a really kind of high fidelity and photorealistic design, but it won't necessarily render at 60 frames a second. And we need that in broadcast, otherwise we can't use it. So somebody who really kind of, is a creative, slightly technical, but understands kind of what it takes and how to optimize things. Those are really needed skills.
Do you think there will be a future possibility for integrations through NDI and other protocols?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in general, we at Epic we're super keen on having standards that sort of everybody follows. NDI is already in a way supported in Unreal. And likewise, we work a lot with our friends at BlackMagic to have good support for their I/O boards in our product. So I think in general, we really want to see interoperability between systems, and it's not only on a signal level, it's also on a how can assets be used across different platforms. So it's not building a closed ecosystem, but it's rather that if you build something to be used in Unreal, you should be able to use the same asset in other technologies as well.
Great. So our last question for you here, what are the differences in skill set between a game designer and a person running virtual production in the Unreal Engine?
Well, it's a great question. I think there's a lot of overlap, to put it like that. But there are maybe some things that when you're running a virtual production, you need more of, and vice versa, less of, from a game side. A virtual studio, as what you're in, is a game, but it's not a game that I'm kind of on a presenter side, but I'm not in your studio, and the whole audience here is also not in. So we are, in a sense, not playing your game. You are playing the game. The camera is essentially the person, if you will, moving around in your game. So that's in a way why Unreal so naturally fits with virtual production, because it is interactive in its nature. I think that's, again, so we need people that kind of understands a little bit of the broadcast terms and the workflows, what goes behind the scenes, a little bit of the gear that we need, because there are some gear needed here in order to put this together. And we need people that really understands, game developers are also great at optimizing, but they prefer to run at, 200 hertz if they can, but it's okay if at certain points in time it drops to 20. Ironically, that's not okay for us, and we don't want to run at 200. We just want to run at 60 all the time, every time, and that takes an extra eye to understand how the different camera positions and how the complexity of the graphic comes to play when you're actually doing the live production.
Thank you so much for being part of our event. We have one more guest speaker. Nikki, would you like to introduce him to us?
Thanks, Matt. Our last guest is Bob Caniglia, the Director of Sales Operations for the Americas at BlackMagic Design. BlackMagic's products have really become the backbone for many live virtual productions such as this one. Now, Bob, is that something that happened organically, or is that an intentional part of design thinking?
So, well, first of all, thank you for having me today. Actually, I think I'd like to say it's a little bit of both. Um, you know, we have a myriad of products that people use for lots of different things, including this, including my setup, your setup. And specifically during the pandemic, we accelerated the production process and the development process of some of our products because so many people were doing remote work, whether it was remote live production or just simply enhanced Zoom calls like these. So I would say that we basically, we had a lot of different products. Alex mentioned earlier the Ultimat. That's a company that we purchased several years ago. And we've accelerated the development of that too because of virtual production, because there needed to be keying at 8K and things like that. So a lot of our products, were there at the beginning, and then since then we've developed others to fit the different segments of the market for this type of work.
For students not in like a media program, how can a person learn these virtual production skills at home on a low budget?
So, the most simple thing that you could do is try and do a little green screen work, similar to what I'm doing. I will reveal that this is a green screen that I'm using, but it happens to be a picture of my old family room, and so I use it mostly because it's blurred and things like that. So, and you can do green screen work with just a green screen, and Zoom has a way to actually do one without even using additional hardware. So you can start to learn some of these things with available hardware and software. We have DaVinci Resolve, which helps to you can create graphics, you could do things like that. You could do editing, obviously, and there's a free download for that. Unreal has some tools that are free that you can download. So there are ways to get started. The internet is your friend always, because you can find lots of videos that'll teach you almost everything about anything at this point, at least get you started enough to see whether you have the appetite to pursue it more.
Okay, that's very helpful. I don't think we have any more live questions, but if anyone in the studio has any questions for Bob, or Bob, if you have anything you would want to share with us.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me just take you through a little bit more about my setup. I showed you the one green screen. So as we said earlier, that I'm in Atlantic City. So I have an office that actually has some windows, so I can point those live cameras out now. So those are live cameras that are going out to the Atlantic. One of the cameras is actually has the ability to be controlled. So I have a zoom lens on that, so I can zoom in and create some camera shading. You probably heard there were fires over in Canada that are wafting the smoke. So that haze is really smoke from those fires. Another thing that I have is the ability, I have two green screen setups. I have the one behind me, but I have a second one where I can walk over and do the weather. So, ta-da.
Very cool.
And then put up the artificial map of all of our weather that we wish we were having, which we are not having, and then sit back down. So all of these things can be done by one person, assuming that you can make up enough things about the weather. So that's just one thing I wanted to show you. And then always I'm able to show my multi-view. So if I go to the multi-view, I can show everybody, the behind the scenes of what I'm doing here, which is also a good teaching tool when I'm talking to people who are trying to learn all these things. So there we are. Back to me. Now you can go to the questions.
Is Ultimat required for like live event, like green screen work, or could you find another way to use a green screen without Ultimat?
So, well, Ultimat's not the only way to do a key. It's probably, I'll say it's the best one available for live like that in a variety of formats. So we have them from HD all the way up. I'm actually using the keyer that's built into the ATEM today because that can work as well.
Okay.
Where you really get into the higher end uses, Ultimate works very well with the Unreal Engine and other products to make the virtual work happen, especially on the higher end shows like Mandalorian. You know, that was an episodic show, so it's like 8 hours of content or whatever per season, and the only way they could do it was using the LED walls and using Unreal and BlackMagic and a couple other things to make those composites in camera, as opposed to having to do months and months of post-production on it.
So our next question is, what would be a good setup to start with? Like what kind of cameras would you want to use? And there's different ATEM models. Which one would you suggest starting with?
Well, budget is always the first question I always have about people. You know, how much do you have to spend? How many inputs do you want? We have 4 input switchers that start at $295. We have cameras that are just over $1,000. You can use, as you guys are using, you're using pocket cameras, you're using studio cameras. You can use the larger ATEM Mini line of products, the Ursa Broadcast rather, and the you know, the other Ursa Mini Pro, Ursa Broadcast, even the Ursa 12K is used in some things. So there's a lot of different cameras that we have. You know, the good thing about the ATEM switcher is that you can use any camera that has HDMI output. And we also make SDI versions of that too, but the HDMI versions are pretty easy. Now, as you progress through the lineup, the ISO models, you can record the program feed as well as isolated recordings of all the inputs, which is a big help. And then you're able to do post-production in DaVinci Resolve. So it opens up a Resolve project. You know, so there are ways to get started with just a camera and a switcher, which is sort of what I did when we got into the pandemic. I didn't always have all of these cameras and 2 green screens and all those things. It sort of grew as our products developed, and as the longer I stayed inside my office, the more I decided I needed to show off more and more and more.
And our last question, will there be a tight integration that BlackMagic will create with Unreal/5 Mars or other softwares to really enable easy virtual production?
Well, I think that we work hand in hand now, and I think the thing about all of this stuff is it's still early days, and the advancements that will be coming in the next several months to years, I think will just continue to grow more and more and more, and we look forward to seeing how people use the tools, and that really helps drive a lot of development all the way around. I think manufacturers have ideas on what they think they should do, what they want to do, but they also keep an ear to the ground to see how things develop. So I'm sure there's always new things coming forward.
Okay, well, that was all really interesting. Thank you so much, Bob, and all of our other guests for joining us. Momo, I think that wraps up our show for today.
I think you're right, TT. I wanted to thank our guest speakers for coming in today, as well as everyone who tuned in to our streams on YouTube and Zoom. I believe that's a wrap for everybody in our studio. So